Hi everyone, it's Lauren and this is the second part of my June reading wrap up. So the book reviews for all of the books that I've read in the second part of June. My next video going up is going to be my favourite books in the first half of 2017 because we are now in July. If you can actually believe it that we are that far through the year. So keep an eye out for that, but firstly the most recent few books that I have read start with Elizabeth is Missing by Emma Healy. This is about an old woman called Maud who has Alzheimer's and she's trying to solve the mystery that her friend Elizabeth is no longer at home, and people don't believe her when she's telling everybody that Elizabeth has gone missing. But really it's more a story of Maud's sister Suki, who went missing in her early 20s. So Maud is jumping in her mind between modern day memories and there's a lot of jumble of what's going on in her everyday life and looking for Elizabeth, and then we get a much clearer picture where she's remembering back at the time when Suki disappeared and what happened then. So it's quite an interesting mix of these two stories and these two parallels, and I thought it was really well put together. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very sad experiencing what it must be like to be old, what it must be like to care for someone who's old and how that affects the rest of Maud's family, and then also the embarrassment and the distress of not having your short-term memories and how disorientating that can be. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed it. It wasn't my favourite novel ever in the world. I think it would be really good for a summer read. The next book I read, I picked up because I have started a little real life book club with my friends. Because I've moved jobs, I've got some friends from the industry that I'm leaving that I'm not going to see every day anymore. And then I also have several friends who read quite a lot, but not as much as me, I suppose. And I have this outlet where I can talk about what I'm reading and they don't. So I decided to bring everybody together. A couple of people said they wanted to do it, and then I just got everyone I knew involved and was like, right, you're all in my book club now, enjoy it, I'll tell you what to read. But it's also a nice excuse to meet up once a month and go to the pub as well, I thought. But the first book that I decided we would read on behalf of everybody was The Vegetarian by Han Kang, because it's quite short. It obviously has had a lot of praise last year and I hadn't read it yet. On reflection, I don't know if this was a great choice for a book club, or at least the first choice for this brand new book club that I have, because it is a lot more difficult and a little bit more out there than I expected it to be. So this is about a woman in Korea, Young Hae, who one day wakes up from a dream and decides that she's not eating meat anymore. However, we never hear from Young Hae's perspective. This book is in 3 parts. The first part is from her husband's perspective, then we get her brother-in-law's, then we get her sister's. I did enjoy this book. I enjoyed the first 2 parts. By the time we got to her sister's portion, I think I'd run out of steam with it, or I didn't like that section as much. What I did find really interesting is that Young Hae is rejecting societal norms and kind of humanity's animalistic tendencies, I suppose, and she's retreating into something more vegetative, and the imagery that came along with that I really enjoyed. However, as it went on, I think I just realised this book is going over my head, and there seemed to be a lot of layers in it. There seemed to be a lot that she was trying to say, but I just didn't get it. And I don't think there's any shame in saying that. Like by the end of the book, I just thought, oh, I don't know really. And that could be to do with the way that I was reading it. Perhaps I was just skimming through it and not really investing myself in the book. But yeah, it was fine. And also I went in thinking I was going to really love it, and it was just okay. I imagine it's probably quite a good book to study, but I didn't really get that much from it on a first read. The next book I read I did really enjoy, and that was The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry. So this is a study on masculinity, or what it means to be male, both biologically and also as part of society. I was really happy to read this because a lot of the writers that I have read on gender studies have been women, and masculinity is something which I experience externally, but I don't have that kind of internalized view of it. It doesn't affect me in that way. So it was really great to hear from a male perspective about these issues, which, to be honest, are quite similar to things that I've read before, but it was great to hear a different voice and an experience that I don't have myself. One of the things he talks about in this book is the idea that the way that we're raising boys is to be an old-fashioned version of men. So perhaps boys are raised to be quite stoic, to be self-sufficient, to not be emotional, and to face any confrontation with anger and violence. And that's kind of building somebody up to be the type of man which perhaps we don't need in a modern society, especially with more balanced gender roles and the fact that a man doesn't have to defend his home turf from beasts, which can lead to some men having pent-up masculinity, as he refers to it, which needs to exert itself itself over something and it can lash out in terms of violence or in terms of just ego or like trying to prove that you're better than somebody else. And it's very interesting him looking at his own experiences and psychoanalyzing himself as he grew up. I don't know that it was the easiest book to read. Some of the sentences were quite wordy, so I don't know how accessible this would be if you're not used to reading about gender already. But just with that kind of minor point, I think this was a really interesting look at what it is to be a man and gender in general. And finally, I read The Blind Fisherman by Mia Couto, who is a Mozambican author. And I read about half of this book and then I put it down, but I thought I would still mention it because I think there are elements in this book that other people would really enjoy. I just found that it wasn't for me. This is a series of short stories, or fables really, because the short stories are very, very short, and I'm talking maybe like between 5 and 10 pages. And individually, I really liked them. There's a lot of themes in there that are very interesting, and it looks at kind of post-colonial Mozambique. There's differences between the societal classes and like the Portuguese, and there are a lot of fantastical characters in these stories. I got a strong vibes of 100 Years of Solitude. However, because each fable was so short, I just felt like they were going over my head, really. Like, as I was reading through it, I felt like I couldn't get into any of the characters. Some of the characters were blurring into one, and perhaps that was the point of it. It's just lots and lots of snapshots. But I got to a point where I felt like I wasn't able to take it in anymore, especially because some of the writing is quite abstract. I just felt like I wasn't paying attention as a reader, so I decided to put it down. But I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for that kind of book. I mean, one of the stories, for example, was about two brothers who got swept away by a river, and so they're written off as dead by the village, and then when they came back 5 years later, the village are going, "Oh no, you're dead, we've written you down as dead, so you know, you can't live here anymore because you're in the way." And then it gets to a point where the brothers are sort of going, "Are we dead? Like, what's going on? Maybe we are dead," because everyone's saying that we are. So it is quite interesting in that way, and I liked these kind of little abstract fairy tales. But in the end, I just decided that I wasn't getting enough from this collection as I probably should have, so I thought I'd put it aside for something else. So I would love to hear from you if you have read any of these books, especially if you have read The Vegetarian and have any more thoughts on it, or if you've read The Blind Fisherman and think I should have continued on with it, I suppose. Any other recommendations of books that you've read and you've really enjoyed in June, I would love to hear those as well, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!